I'm Julian Assange.
Roger, I'll get you in constraint.
Editor of WikiLeaks. We've exposed the world's secrets.
These documents belong to the United States government.
Been attacked by the powerful.
The United States strongly condemns.
Hey, quit asking questions.
He broke the law.
Illegally shoot the son of a...
For 500 days now, I've been detained without charge. But that hasn't stopped us.
Mike dead.
Today, we're on a quest for revolutionary ideas that can change the world tomorrow. A furious war over the future of our societies is underway. For most, this war is invisible. On the one side, a network of governments and corporations that spy on everything we do. On the other, the cypherpunks, virtuoso geek activists who make codes and shake public policy. This is the movement which spawned WikiLeaks. I am joined by 3 cypherpunk friends. From Germany, Andy Müller-Maguhn. From France, Jeremie Zimmerman. And from the United States, Jacob Appelbaum. I want to ask them, is the future of the world the future of the internet?
Before you go too negative, please, I would like to agree with you. I think that architecture matters, and that this is central to everything we stand for, but that this is a message that we have a responsibility to convey to the public.
Absolutely.
Because we understand it as hackers, as technicians who build the internet every day and play with it.
You know, there's one good thing about governments is there's never a singular. They're always in plural. That is finally what is going to save us from the big brother, because there's going to be too many who want to be big brother, and they will have fights amongst each other and so on.
I don't think so, Andy. I think we once upon a time had national elites that were competitive with each other, and now they're linking together and they're lifting off their respective
They
policies.
are linking together, you are right in that respect, and I'm not sure it's really going to save our ass, but there is the chance of actually keeping our own identity and we have to stick to our own infrastructure. That's like the important thing to learn
I think this is why the copyright wars are so essential, because with peer-to-peer technologies, since Napster in '99, people just understood, got it, that by sharing files between individuals,
You're a criminal.
No, you build better culture. People who practice.
No, you're a criminal.
That's the storytelling. But you build a better culture for yourself. Everybody who used Napster. Let me finish that, please.
The history of the human race and the history of culture is the history of copying thoughts, modifying, and processing them further on.
Culture is meant to be shared.
And if you call it stealing, then you're like on the cynical...
We've had in the West, since like the 1950s, we've had industrial culture.
Yeah, but
our culture has become sort of an industrial product.
You want to copyright and restrict your thoughts, well...
we are feeding the troll here, because he's playing the devil's advocate, and he's doing it very good.
It's such obvious bullshit.
Yeah, it is bullshit. In the political storytelling, it is called stealing. But I want to make my point here, that everybody who used Napster back in '99 became a music fan, and then went to concerts and became a prescriptor telling everybody, oh, you should listen to those people, you should go to that concert, and so on. And when it is about sharing culture, it is exactly the same when it is about sharing knowledge. So we have examples where decentralized services and sharing between individuals makes things better. And the counter example is the devil's advocate you were playing, where an industry comes and say, oh, this is stealing and this is killing everybody, killing artists, killing Hollywood, killing cinema, killing kittens and everything. And I once again have to disagree with the devil's advocate you've been playing earlier. Some conservative members of the European Parliament today now understand that individuals, when they share things, when they share files without a profit, shouldn't be enforced. Shouldn't go to jail, shouldn't be punished.
We all speak about the privacy of communication and the right to publish. And that's something that is quite easy to understand, has a long history. And in fact, journalists love to talk about it because they're protecting their own interests. But if we compare that value to the value of the privacy and freedom of economic interaction, actually, when every time we see an economic interaction, or every time the CIA sees an economic interaction, they can see it's this party from this location to this party in this location, and they have a figure to the value and importance of the interaction. So isn't actually the freedom or privacy of economic interactions more important than the freedom of speech?
They're inherently linked.
That's a very tough one.
They're inherently linked.
If we just look from a simple intelligence perspective, you've got a $10 million intelligence budget. You can spy on people's email interactions, or you can have total surveillance of their economic interactions.
Well, the point is
which one would you prefer?
Well, these days, what they will do is they will say, okay, we will just force the payment and bankings to use the internet, so we have both. And that's what they did. So actually, there was this very interesting thing from the cables also, that the Russian government tried to negotiate a way that Visa and MasterCard payments from Russian citizens within Russia would have to be processed in Russia, and Visa and MasterCard actually refused it.
Yeah, well, the power of the US Embassy and Visa combined was enough to prevent even Russia from coming up with its own domestic payment card system.
Meaning that even payments from Russian citizens within Russian to Russian shops will be processed through American data centers.
So when Putin goes out to buy a Coke,
will have jurisdictional control, or at least
when Putin goes out to buy a Coke, 30 seconds later it is known in Washington DC. So this,
and that, of course, is a very unsatisfying situation. Independent of the fact if I like the US or not, this is just a very central, dangerous thing to have a central place where all payments are stored, because it invites de facto to all kinds of usage of that data.
Well, the architecture, I mean, one of the fundamental things that cypherpunks recognize is that the architecture actually defines the political situation. So if you have a centralized architecture, even if the best people in the world are in control of it, it attracts assholes. And those assholes do things with that power that the original designers would not do. No matter where we look, we can see, especially with financial systems, that effectively, even if the people have the best of intentions, it doesn't matter. I mean, the architecture is the truth. It's true for the internet with regard to communications. The so-called lawful intercept systems, which is just a nice way of saying spying on people, right? That stuff was built, I think.
That's a euphemism, lawful interception.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
like lawful murder. You've heard about that. The drone strikes on American citizens by the U.S. President Obama. You know, when he killed Anwar al-Awlaki's 16-year-old son in Yemen, that's lawful murder, right? Or targeted killing, as they put it, right? So so-called lawful intercept is the same thing. You just put lawful in front of everything, and then all of a sudden, because the state does it, it's legitimate. But it's, in fact, the architecture of the state that allows them to do that at all. And it is the architecture of the laws and the architecture of the technology just as the same as it's the architecture of financial systems. And what the cypherpunks wanted to do was to create systems where we could compensate each other in a truly free way, where it was not possible to interfere. And with financial issues, it is the most dangerous thing to be working on. I mean, there's a reason that the person that created Bitcoin did so anonymously.
With money, it's a lot more complicated, and we have these things called money laundering laws and so on, and they tell us that, you know, drug and terrorist organizations are like otherwise abusing the it's one of these
of the
abusing the infrastructure to do evil things. Actually, I'd be very interested to have more surveillance companies and government spendings to be transparent on these issues. But so the question is, what do we buy when we provide total anonymity of only the money system? What would happen, actually? I think this might lead here and there to interesting areas where people make it themselves a little more easy and say, well, you know, I can raise my voice, I can go to the parliament, but I can also just buy some politicians, which would...
You're describing the US, right? There is here a real problem. I think.
Are you sure it's a problem, Jeremy? Maybe, in fact, it's a good attribute that those industries that are productive,
I think the devil's advocate drank too much vodka or whiskey or whatever.
Jeremie, wait. Let's actually see if he can finish this sentence without Britain cracking up.
Go ahead.
Troll us, Master Troll.
Those industries that are productive, that produce wealth, produce wealth for the whole society, in fact, because they're productive, they have the money in order to make sure that they continue to be productive, and that random legislation that comes out as a result of political myth-making isn't constraining their productive activities. And the best way to do that is, in fact, to buy congressmen to take the labour of your productive industry and use it to modify the law to keep the productive nature of your industry going.
Wait, I'll get this one. Ready? Wait, no. Ready? No.
Wow.
Why?
There are a couple of reasons, but for one, there's a feedback loop that is extremely negative. So, for example, I believe the largest political campaign donor in the state of California is the Prison Guards Union. And part of the reason to do this is because they like to lobby for stronger laws, not because they care about the rule of law, but because it is a job incentive. So if you see that these people are lobbying to create more prisons, to jail more people, to have longer sentences, what is it they are effectively doing? What they're doing is they're using the benefit that they actually receive for the labor that was actually beneficial, arguably, in the first place, in order to expand the monopoly that the state grants to them in what they're allowed to do.
So they're just using it for wealth transfer from actual productive industries to industries that are not productive.
You could sum it up that way. You could also sum it up
But maybe that's just a small component. I mean, you always... every system is abused. Perhaps these, if you like, free riders that are just involved in wealth transfer.
Yeah,
perhaps those are a small element. And in fact, the majority of the lobbying, the majority of the influence on Congress does actually come from productive industries, making sure that the laws continue to permit those productive industries from being productive.
I think you're missing, I mean, okay, the question is what's the policy here? So what's the positive way we could formulate these things?
I just wonder whether we couldn't, in fact, sort of standardise the actual practice in the United States and formalise it. So you do simply buy senators.
No.
So you actually buy them, and you actually buy votes in the Senate.
Let's assume we had the money. Let's assume we had the money to buy the...
Yeah, and it was all open, and it's highest bidder, and each one goes for an auction.
But the weapon industry would still have more money.
Each one goes for an auction.
So, because it's...
No, I think it wouldn't. I actually think the military-industrial complex would be relatively marginalised because their ability to operate behind back doors in a system that is not open to general market bidding is, in fact, higher than other industries.
But they had a system of privilege.
I just want to go back to his
Jeremy.
I just want to have the privilege.
You've got to address the clearance thing he just said there, because there's a fundamental inequality in the system. Come on, no. There's a fundamental...
Okay,
You've got to talk about the fundamental inequality. I mean, you're the French guy in the room. Come on.
When you say, let's let the dominant actors decide what the policy will be, I can answer you from the perspective of what was the internet in the last 15 years, where innovation was so-called bottom-up, where new practices emerged out of nothing, where a couple of guys in a garage invented a technology that spread like...
for nearly everything, for Apple, for Google, for everything. YouTube.
For everything that happened on the internet just boomed after being unknown a few months or few years before. So you cannot predict what will be the next innovation. My point here is that policy has to adapt to society and not the other way around. We have the impression with the copyright wars that legislator tries to make the whole society change to adapt to a framework that is defined by Hollywood. Say, okay, what you're doing with your new cultural practice is just morally wrong. So if you don't want to stop it, then we'll design legal tools to make you stop doing what you think is good. This is not the way to make good policy. So I'm convinced that when you enable the most powerful industrial actors to decide what policy should be, you don't go that way.
Jake, can you speak a little bit about this detainment that you've had at US airports and why that has occurred?
Well, I mean, they've asserted that that it occurs because I know why. But, you know, to speak to your point about what it is like, I mean, depending on when, you know, they always give me different answers, but usually they say one response, which is, I mean, uniformly across the board, they say, because we can. And I say, okay, I do not dispute your authority. Well, I do dispute your authority. I do not dispute it now. I merely wish to know why this is happening to me. Now, I mean, people tell me all the time, well, isn't it obvious? You work on tour. You're sitting next to Julian. What did you expect? Right? I mean, for example, I've had people literally tell me, what did you expect for associating with people like this? I've also had them tell me bullshit like, oh, remember 9/11? That's why. Or because we want you to answer some questions, and this is the place where you have the least amount of rights, we assert. And I mean, the stuff that they do in this, you know, in this situation, they deny access to a lawyer, they'll deny access to a bathroom, but they'll give you water, right? They'll give you something to drink in order, like a diuretic, in order to convince you that you really want to cooperate in some way. They did this to pressure for political reasons. They asked me questions about how I feel about the Iraq War, how I feel about the Afghani War, you know, basically, all of these steps of the way, they repeated the tactics of the FBI during COINTELPRO, for example, where they specifically tried to assert, through their authority to change political realities in my own life, and to try to pressure me not only to change them, but to give them some special access to what's going on in my head. And they've seized my property. I'm not even really at liberty to discuss all of the things that have occurred to me.
So this has happened to you, but Chinese people I speak to, when they speak about the Great Firewall of China, in the West we talk about this in terms of censorship, and that it's blocking Chinese citizens from coming out and reading what is said about the Chinese government in the West and by Chinese dissidents and by the Falun Gong and so on. But their concern is actually not about censorship. Their concern is that in order to have internet censorship, there must also be internet surveillance. In order to check what someone is looking at, to see whether it is permitted or denied, you must be seeing it, and therefore if you're seeing it, you can record it all. And so this has had a tremendous chilling effect on Chinese.
I guess I think that it is important to just to remember that censorship and surveillance are not issues of other places. And, you know, people in the West love to talk about how Iranians and the Chinese and North Koreans, they need anonymity and they need freedom and they need all of that stuff, but we don't need it here. And it's very important to note that actually it is not just oppressive regimes. Because if you happen to be in the top echelon of any regime, it's not oppressive to you. It turns out, right? But I mean, we consider the UK to be a wonderful place. We consider, generally people think Sweden is a pretty great place. And yet you can see that when you fall out of favor with the people in power, that, you know, you don't end up in a favorable position. I mean, but you're still alive, right? So I mean, clearly that's a symbol that it's a free country.
My point is that it's
but maybe we should actually speak about this. I mean, censorship.
But Sweden?
Internet censorship in the West.
In WikiLeaks, there was this case that people couldn't, even in the accusation against you, couldn't read the documents. And Bradley Manning.
So the US prosecutors. So the Pentagon set up a filtering system so that any email sent to the Pentagon with the word WikiLeaks in it would be filtered. And so the prosecution, in attempting to prosecute the case, of course, was mailing back and forth about WikiLeaks and didn't receive the email replies because they had the word WikiLeaks in them.
So which brings us back, wait a second, to the really basic question. And the basic question is there something such as negative affecting information? So from a society point of view, do we want censored internet because it's better for society or not? And even if we talk about child pornography, you could argue saying, wait a moment, this child pornography addresses a problem that is abuse of children. And in order to solve the problem, we need to know the problem.
Right.
So if you filter it out,
evidence for the crime.
The solution is always another one than censorship. When we talk about child pornography, we shouldn't even use the word pornography. It's a representation of crime scenes, of child abuse. We all agree that we should remove those images from the internet.
Bullshit. I'm sorry. I'm squirming over here. It's so frustrating to hear the argument that you're making. I want to throw up, right? Because what you just did is you said, I want to erase history. And you know, I mean, maybe I'm an extremist in this case, and in many other cases, I'm sure. But I'm just going to go out on a limb here. You know, this is actually an example of where erasing history does a disservice, right? It turns out that with the internet, we learned that there's an epidemic in society of child abuse. That's what we learned with this child pornography issue. You know, I think it's better to call it child exploitation. We see evidence of this. Yeah. Covering it up, erasing it, is, I think, a travesty to do that. Because, in fact, you can learn so much about society as a whole. For example, you can learn, and I mean, you know, I'm obviously never going to have a career in politics after I finish this sentence, but I mean, just to be clear about this, right? I mean, you learn, for example, who is producing it. You learn about the people that are victimized. It is impossible for people to ignore the problem, but the answer is not to destroy a medium or to police that medium. It is, when you find evidence, to prosecute the crimes that the medium has documented. It is not to weaken that medium. It is not to cripple society as a whole over this thing. The easy thing to do is to pretend that it doesn't exist, and then to stop it and say that that has stopped the abuse, and that doesn't.
Andy, I spoke recently with the president of Tunisia, and I asked him about what was going to happen to the intelligence records of Ben Ali, so the equivalent to the Stasi archives of Tunisia. And he said that, well, these were very interesting, and the intelligence agencies, he would have to, they're a problem and they're dangerous, and he would have to knock them off one by one. But in relation to these archives, he thought it best for the cohesion of Tunisian society that they all be kept secret, so there wasn't a blame game. You were a young man during the fall of the Stasi in East Germany. Can you speak a little bit about the Stasi archives and what do you think about this opening up of security archives?
Well, Germany probably has the most well-documented intelligence agency on the planet, or one of those, the East German Staatssicherheit, all the handbooks, procedural papers, training documents, internal studies, internal training, all that documents are roughly public. I think this is a very good thing to learn from, and that is what the president of Tunisia should consider, that he needs to distinguish between two things. The one is personal records. I can understand that it is a bit too much to expect that they publish all the personal records the former intelligence agency has raised.
Did you follow the situation with the Amdawa in Egypt? So where the domestic state security, 100,000 strong people went in, they looted the archive, and lots of material came out and was spread around the place. You could buy records for $2 in the local market, uploaded to, and it hasn't destroyed Egyptian society.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying that I do have a bit of an understanding of people don't want their personal records to be released. I can understand that.
Let's take a step back. You argue, essentially, from a completely flawed point, which is this notion that data is private when it is limited, essentially, and that's just not true. For example, in my country, if 1 million people have a security clearance and they're allowed to access that private data...
4.3 million.
How can you call that data private?
All right.
Right? That's the problem, right? Is that it is not actually truly 100% secret from every person on the planet. No. It is only secret from the people
It's secret from the powerless and to the powerful there.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
But, I mean, it's not...
We can go to a broader issue, though. So the internet has led to an explosion of the amount of information that is available to the public.
Yeah.
It's just extraordinary. The educative function is extraordinary. On the other hand, what is not seen, and people talk about WikiLeaks and they say, people talk about WikiLeaks and they say, oh, look, all that private government information is now public. The government can't keep anything secret, etc. I say this is rubbish. I say that WikiLeaks is the shadow of a shadow. And in fact, powerful groups have such a vast amount of secret material now that it dwarfs the amount of publicly available material. And the operations of WikiLeaks are just a percentage fraction of this privately held material. So do you think, when you look at the balance between powerful insiders knowing every credit card transaction in the world, shadow states of information that are starting to develop and swapping with each other and developing alliances and connections with each other and into the private sector and so on, versus the increased size of the commons. So the internet is a common tool for humanity to speak to itself, and that increase in power. How do you see, Jeremie, the battle in these playing out?
Indeed, all those topics are bound together. I'll try to make the link between 5 conversations ago and 3 conversations ago. And because when we talk about concentrating power, we once again talk about architecture. And when we talk about internet censorship, it is about centralizing the power to determine what people may be able to access or not, and whether it's government censorship or also private-owned censorship. They're changing the architecture of the internet from one universal network to a balkanization of small sub-networks. But what we are discussing since the beginning are all global issues, whether we're talking of the financial system going awry, whether we're talking of corruption, whether we're talking of geopolitics or energy or environment, or I don't know. All of these are global problems that mankind is facing today. And we have still one global tool between our hands that enables better communication, better sharing of knowledge, better participation in political and democratic process. What I suspect is that a global, universal internet is the only tool we still have between our hands to address those global issues. And this is why this is a central fight that we have to fight and that we all have a responsibility here to fight.
Well, they have this notion from Cypherpunks that code is law. On the internet, what you can do is defined by what programs are existing, what programs run, and therefore code is law.
Absolutely. The key thing I think that people should walk away with, especially if there's some 16-year-old or 18-year-old person that wishes they could make the world a better place, the thing they have to know is that you can build alternatives. And everyone, especially with the internet, is empowered to do that for the context that they exist inside of. And it is not that they have a duty to do it, but it is that if they wish to do this, they can. And if they do that, they will impact many people, especially with regard to the internet. Building those alternatives has an amplification, a magnification, where I think you use
It's not just for you. If you build something, you can serve it to 1 billion people.
I mean, that's what I see. That's why I'm here. Because if I don't support you now in the things that you are going through, what kind of world am I building? What kind of message do I send when I let a bunch of pigs push me around? No way, never. We have to build. And we have to change that. We have to, I mean, as Gandhi said, right? You have to be the change you want to see in the world. But, you know, you have to be the trouble you want to see in the world, too.